The Lord of the Flies. Just finished this one, and I'm downloading the movies. Apparently, there was the 1963 movie, which I think is the one I saw when I was younger, and then there's a 1990 remake that I've never seen. And I don't remember that much about it, other than there's like these kids on an island, and they're surviving, and there's a fat kid. I kind of remember the conch. Because that's where Survivor got the whole, like, you can only speak when you're holding the conch thing, which is, like, part of the book. And then, there's the thing about the fat kid has these glasses. Kind of remember that, like, it's at the bottom of the cover. And they're using the glasses to make fire. And then, he pisses off this one kid, he's really mean. And they all start, like, turning into savages over time. And that kid kills Piggy, that's the fat kid. And I remembered it as, like, as soon as they killed Piggy, that's when the Navy shows up and they grab that kid and they, like, that freaked out. Like, what are you doing? Like, you haven't even been gone that long. It's only been like a week or something like that, right? But apparently, I don't know if it's true or not, but the book was a little bit different. First of all, it's written by a British person, which is, there's a few things that kind of, like, I didn't really understand what they were saying because of the Britishness. There's a lot of the descriptions of the island is a little bit too much, a little bit too wordy, like describing just stuff that doesn't even matter. Most of the good stuff is in like the dialogue and stuff in the characters. I didn't really understand how the beginning of the book, how they all got stranded on the island, because it's just kids. They kind of divide the kids up into the big uns and the little uns, which reminds me of 9 out of 10 Counts does Countdown. Because when they choose the numbers. So they're all in one place, and they all start like trying to keep a fire going to like have a smoke sit. Oh, I don't understand like how they got on the island though, because they said something about they were shot down. So they must have been on a plane. Must have been during some war. There's a reference at one point to the Reds. I don't know if that means the Russians, like Great Britain and Russia. Was that like Cold War, or just like at the end it says the World War II broke out and he joined the Royal Navy. The guy that wrote the book did. So maybe it's World War II, D-Day operations. I don't know. So why were these kids the only ones to survive a plane crash? Why were they on a plane that was shot down in a war? How did none of the adults survive? Where's the plane wreckage? None of this is like explained. They just kind of start out there on the island, and they're all in different places, and he blows the conch when they all come together. That's how they find each other, but, like, I didn't really get it. But then, so they all start out in one part of the island. They're making these shelters. The little kids just kind of fuck off, and they don't really pay attention. They can't get them to do anything. The one kid, Jack, he wants to just go hunt all the time. So he gets some kids together, and they go off, like, looking for pigs. And they kind of turn feral because of, like, they start doing the whole, like, kill the pig, cut his throat, spill the blood, and they start doing this chanting and stuff. They are successful at killing pigs, but I forgot how he first broke Piggy's glasses. They were, like, fighting over it to start the fire or something, maybe. And, like, they did something when they started a fire. They, like, caught the island on fire. I don't know how big this island is, too. It's kind of hard to explain. Like, it's not so big that you can hide from them, but it's big enough that there's, like, a mountain you gotta climb, and there's a wooded area, and there's, like, these pig runs, and there's, like, the beach, and there's, like, different areas to the island, but it's not so big. It's not, like, more than a day's walk across end to end, I don't think. So, like, they caught the island on fire, and they said there was this kid that had a birthmark, and Piggy was trying to, like, let's get everybody together and, like, figure out who everybody is and how many of us there are, and, like, write down names and stuff. Everybody's like, fuck that shit, it's just a bunch of bureaucracy crap, and they don't want to pay attention to them. So then they don't know how many of them they started with, so if somebody comes up missing, they don't know if he's been killed. They have no idea. So that the fire burns the island, and this one kid's gone, so, like, nobody wants to talk about it. I think we just burned this fucking kid to death when we set this fire. I think he's... They never find his body. And then there's this thing where they're all asleep, and a plane gets hit above them, and it like spirals out, and a parachute guy comes down and hits at the top of the mountain where they had the fire, so they won't go up there near the fire anymore. And they keep calling him the Beast because there's just the parachute keeps like inflating and getting big, and they don't know what it is, and they won't get close enough to check it out. So it's like they're afraid of this dead guy. I think he died on the way down in the parachute or something. So like they won't go near him until finally this kid Simon goes up there. I think they kind of split apart at this point. Like the hunters are all one on the beach, and then Sam and Eric, the twins, and the main character and Piggy, Ralph and Piggy, they're all like at the other end with a few of the little ones, the kids, where the shelters are. So like Simon goes up there, and I think he figures out that it's a dead soldier. So he's like trying to go down and tell him, but like he's so tired or something, he kind of staggers into the camp, and they think he's the Beast. So they all attack him and they jump on him and kill him. I don't remember that from the movie at all. I thought they only killed Piggy. So, it didn't really say how they killed him. It just said they jumped on him and there was like claws and biting, and I think they poked him with some spears, and I don't know if the ocean, they threw him in the ocean, or the ocean washed the body away. They don't really talk about disposing of bodies either. So then, like, this whole second group has this like castle rock they've set up, and they have like this big rock on top with a wedge or something, like a piece of wood holding it up. Like you hit the lever and it knocks the wood out, and the big giant rock falls down. It's like a trap, and they're like challenging people to see who they are if they come in. They're like doing all this kind of like medieval kind of shit. So that ends up like they steal Piggy's glasses to make their own fire because they killed a pig and they ain't got no way to make fire because they split up. So they raid the other guys. They steal his glasses. The next day they go to confront them. Things get out of hand, and they drop a rock on Piggy, and it pretty much just obliterates Piggy, and it knocks him onto a rock in the middle of the ocean. His head splits open, his brains spill out, and then the ocean comes just like and washes him away. But there's just blood everywhere. They don't want to like acknowledge it because they're all ashamed, sort of, but not really. And then the twins get captured and converted to the hunter tribe, whatever they're called, the savages, and they're all like painting their faces. A lot of it is like if you paint your face, you're not seeing the person you used to be, so you can like kind of not pretend to be who you are. There's like a lot of symbolism in this. There's also like at the end of the book, it explains like some of the symbolism of like when they're killing the sow pig. It was like supposed to represent sex or something, and then there's a thing about the Lord of the Flies. It was like when they killed their first pig, they put a head on a spike next to the dead soldier, and the guts where they gutted the pig were underneath, had flies all over it, so they called Simon was calling that pig the Lord of the Flies, and that means like Beelzebub in Hebrew or something. Yeah, or Beelzebub means Lord of the Flies. What was the other thing about? But the guy at the end, when they start doing a manhunt on Ralph, and they start setting fires and are chasing him with spears, and all of a sudden the Navy shows up, and he's like asking them like who's in charge and what's going on here and stuff. This is really interesting. The officer, having interrupted a manhunt, prepares to take the children off the island in a cruiser which will presently be hunting its enemy in the same implacable way. And who will rescue the adult in his cruiser? Oh, I left out some part. The whole book is symbolic in nature, except the rescue in the end where adult life appears dignified and capable, but in reality it's enmeshed in the same evil as the symbolic life of the children on the island. So we look at these kids and they're all killing each other and starting pointless wars, and then they're rescued by an adult who's in the middle of driving a boat. It's in the middle of a pointless war. So really, are we any better than these savages? That's what's supposed to make you think. It's kind of true. Who's going to rescue the adults if we're all doing the same dumb shit as these kids on the island? So, makes a good point. I see why this would be considered classic literature, even though I only give it like 3 out of 5 stars because there's too descriptive. I don't know. It was good, but it's like, wasn't that entertaining. But I'm going to watch the movies. I'm going to do like a separate review of the movies I'm going to add on to this. So I wanted to do this book part before I watched them, so it wouldn't taint my review of the books or the movie. I want to get them confused. Okay, I have just spent 3 hours watching both versions of the 1963 and the 1990 Lord of the Flies to make this video, which probably will get 50 views. So, whatever. So the 1963 version was not the one I saw when I was younger. It was the 1990 version. 1963, black and white. Very, very close to that adaptation of the book. It's almost like word for word. Even it has like the scene where Jack is like almost gonna stab a pig for the first time, and he like does it because he's scared, and then later on he just like gets way into it. And they're all British kids. The only thing it doesn't have from the book is the part where they burn half the island and the kid with the birthmark disappears. Like they didn't kill that kid. But the climbing up on the mountain seemed right. You know, there's like the mountain was right the right size of what I kind of imagined it. The guy that plays Piggy, it's pretty good for both versions. But the one in the British version, he's real like, he talks real slow, and he starts. There's just one part that's not in the book, but it was in the movie, where he's telling these kids like a story, and he's like, "I'm from Canberra. It used to be called Cambridge Town, and then Cambridge got its mail mixed up with Cambridge Town, so they decided to change the name. So they took the C-A-N from Cambridge, and then Burr means river, so they added that, and then a lot of the surrounding towns ended in Lee, and that's how they call it Camberley instead of Cambridge." And they just kept going on and on, like, what is your problem, dude? Just spit it out. It's like, but then, another thing was that I didn't really catch in the book. He was talking about like sharpening a stick at both ends and what that means. That's when they like stick a stick in the ground and then they put the head on top. So what he's saying, Jack sharpened a stick at both ends when he's telling Ralph like what's going to happen when they're going to come for him. He's saying they're going to cut his head off because these motherfuckers are crazy. And that was kind of in both versions too. One thing about the British version was there was a lot of child nudity. Not child porn, I guess, but it's like a lot of them are running around in their tidy whities in the 90s version, and they're getting like holes ripped in the back of their ass, and it's like they're all wet all the time. It's like in the British version, they've got dicks hanging out and everything, and it's just like, what am I watching? This was like 1963, I guess. It wasn't a big deal back then, but very realistic. And then the 1990 version, the color version. This is the one you've probably seen if you have seen it before, and it's got the crazy music, you know, when they're chasing the guy, and they're like one guy's pretending to be a pig, and they're chasing him around the fire and like mock stabbing him, and then that's when Simon comes out with a big glow stick, and they just murder him on the beach, and then they go after Piggy. But when they drop the big rock on Piggy, the 1963 version, it's a big giant, like real sharp coral reef looking triangular rock, and it makes sense because when it splatters him, it just fucking explodes him pretty much. And the American version, the 1990 version, it's like just a brown boulder just cracks him on the head and his brains spill out, which is like kind of how the book described it. But 1990 version, I made some notes of what the difference was. First of all, they're American kids. They kind of set it in an island that was too big. It almost looked like a Japanese island or a Hawaiian island or something, like a whole state. It kind of tried to address the problem I said about the book where you don't know how all these kids got there without an adult surviving. So it starts out like they're in the water with an adult, and the adult's like injured. A raft inflates itself, and they all like get on the raft. Somehow they put this adult in the raft with them. So they were like keeping this guy, Captain Benson. He's like the pilot, I guess, of this plane, finding these kids from somewhere back home. I mean, it's kind of set in like Vietnam era. You can tell by the camo and the soldiers at the end, but there's also like UH-1 Huey helicopters flying around. instead of planes. But I don't see how like some kids from this, they're in like a military school all together, and how would they be coming back home from somewhere in the middle of the Vietnam War, and like the Vietnamese didn't shoot down like airplanes. But I guess they needed to make it make sense. And another thing was like the 63 version. Like in the book, the kids that became the hunters, they're like all part of this chorus in school. Like they're singers. And they're all like marching down the beach with their robes on and their togs or whatever they call it. It's like a British thing, I guess. And they're singing like this song with their high-pitched girly voices, and like Jack is more like effeminate, I guess, so it doesn't seem that scary. Then the American version, he's kind of like the Johnny from Karate Kid or something. He's just, everybody's like real, they're cursing a lot, and there's like fuck you and all kinds of like crazy like curses and swears and stuff. He was pretty scary. So another thing, the conch wasn't that big of a deal. They came in on a boat with the grown-up. The grown-up, they keep him kind of in like mosquito netting, and he keeps like coming in and out of consciousness, and he keeps like getting away from him. And he finally like runs off and disappears in the night, and he gets up in this cave. So instead of like having the pilot that's supposed to be the monster on the top of the mountain with the parachute flopping around, which that also makes sense why they would think he's the Lord of the Flies, because the pilot's helmet with the black visor and like the little air tubes gas mask kind of looks like a fly's head. So I didn't think about that. But in the American version, it's just like a pilot. He's not got any stuff on. He's just like a dude. And he crawls into a cave. So the first thing he's like a bear. And it's kind of, I don't know. They got glow sticks. It's more like modern. Plus the island was, I already said that. Ralph starts out with a broken arm. I don't know what that was all about. That just kind of seemed random for no reason. I think he just kind of got over it. And then they find an accordion just washed up on the beach that had no purpose or it just didn't do anything for the story. It's just different for no reason. There was the grass fire that the first movie didn't have, but it didn't kill anybody. They kind of got it put out. And the top of the mountain was just kind of like a grassy area with a tree, so it didn't really look like it that much of a mountain. Yeah, so that's like most of the differences. But then what? Music kicks in, and that like kind of like a chanting chorus of, I don't even know what kind of song you would call that, and they're like chasing them. And I don't know, they kill fucking Piggy, and that's another thing. People don't realize how vulnerable having glasses is. Like, you can just take my glasses off and I can't see shit. I mean, I can see pretty much what's around me, but I have no detail. If somebody was to throw a rock at me, I probably wouldn't see the rock coming. It would just smack me in the face, and you could probably murder me on an island pretty easily. So, just like having your glasses broken or like taken from you is pretty fucking scary. It's kind of like that Twilight Zone episode where that guy just wants to read books all the time. And then nuclear war happens and he gets all the books in the world, but his glasses break so he can't read them. It's like fucked up. Yeah. I think I had more to say. I can't remember what it was. I talked about the nudity. I talked about the tidy whities. So many tidy whities. Just kids running around. That's the thing about, like, these kids are just old enough, some of them, that if you had the ability to, like, force them to do whatever you wanted, like, take control of them like ants. Like, when they're piling up wood on the fire, like, they're getting a pretty big amount of wood. These guys could do some work if you, like, directed their chaotic energies. And I kept thinking, like, how would I have turned this situation around if I had been Ralph? Like, how could you have gotten them to come over to your side? Like, once they killed that first kid, Simon, you could have told the kids, like, if we get rescued, Jack's going to go to prison, and if you all, like, stay on his side, you're going to go to prison with him, and you probably would get them all to turn to your side. And I had some other ideas, too. I can't remember what they were. Oh, you could tell them that you made a deal with the monster. and did you have control over the monster, something like that, they would probably believe it, because these are pretty vulnerable, or like gullible kids. If you told them that you actually went out and saw the monster, you knew what it was, and you could control it, I mean, yeah, they're all scared to death of this monster. So there's a couple of ways you could have, like, maybe turned the tides. Maybe not get everybody killed. Oh. Pretty crazy book, though. Lord of the Flies, December 29th. It's going to be declared Lord of the Flies Day from henceforth.